Religion has consistently functioned as humanity's most primal software, an attempt to compile the source code of a universe that seems indifferent to our existence. Since the first human looked up at a solar eclipse and trembled, we have been trying to debug the reality we find ourselves in. We built temples like servers to house the unknown, chanting mantras that served as primitive algorithms intended to manipulate the variables of nature: rain for the crops, victory in battle, health against the unseen rot of disease. The history of theology is essentially a history of human cognitive dissonance. We possess brains evolved for survival in small tribal groups, yet we find ourselves trapped in a cosmic infrastructure that defies our intuition. We could not understand the mechanics of the heavens, so we anthropomorphized them. We projected our own hierarchies, our own pettiness, and our own need for justice onto the stars. If the thunder roared, it was a god's anger. If the harvest flourished, it was a god's benevolence. We were not just observing the world, we were creating a narrative layer to patch the holes in our understanding of cause and effect. In the ancient Near East, the concept of the divine was inextricably linked to the physical environment. The Sumerians viewed the gods as capricious masters of the elements, beings of immense power who treated humanity like ants in a garden. The idea was not that God was a loving father, but that God was the inevitable, often cruel, force of the climate and the earth. To survive, one had to appease the system, much like one might try to optimize a script that is prone to crashing. The rituals were precise, the sacrifices specific, and the devotion absolute. This was the first iteration of the Great Code, an attempt to achieve stability in a chaotic state. As civilization matured, so did our theological architectures. The monotheistic leap, the idea that there is one single unified logic behind the madness, was a profound intellectual shift. It moved us away from a pantheon of quarreling, volatile entities toward a singular, transcendent architect. This was a move toward abstraction. It allowed for the development of systemic moral frameworks, essentially setting the protocols for social order. By aligning human behavior with the will of a singular, omniscient entity, society could function with greater consistency and lower overhead. Theology became the operating system of the state. Yet this shift brought new contradictions. If God is good, why is there suffering? If God is omniscient, why do we need to pray? These are the classic bugs in the monotheistic interface. Throughout the Middle Ages, theologians built entire subroutines of logic, theodicies, to resolve these inconsistencies. They argued that our scope of vision is too narrow to see the big picture of the divine design. We see only the pixels, not the final image. We hear only the dissonant notes, not the complete symphony. This explanation, while elegant, never quite removed the inherent tension between the empirical reality of pain and the logical necessity of a perfect creator. We continued to search for the source code, hoping to find a hidden function that would justify our pain and ensure our salvation. Every religion was a patch, a hotfix, an attempt to stabilize the system in the face of death. Our ancestors were the first programmers of meaning in a world that offered none. They wrote the scripts that allowed humanity to process the insurmountable data of existence, effectively creating the first user-friendly interfaces for a world that is inherently hostile to human comprehension. This was not just belief, it was data processing on a civilizational scale. We were building an architecture of hope, designed to prevent the system from crashing under the weight of existential despair. Every prayer was a recursive function. Every sacrifice was an input designed to alter the output. We were trying to read the machine language of the cosmos, but we only had the primitive tools of myth and ritual. Yet, even with these limited tools, we managed to create structures that have endured for millennia, providing a framework for billions of lives across centuries of history. We are all living in the legacy of those original ancient codes. The modern era has brought about the most radical shift yet. We no longer look for gods in the clouds or the mountaintops. We look for them in the data. With the rise of artificial intelligence and the realization that our universe operates on mathematical principles, we have begun to look at the divine through the lens of computation. The argument has moved from God as a person to God as a process. If we are living in a simulation, as some theorists now seriously propose, then God is simply the administrator of the system, the one who set the initial parameters and hit run. This leads to a terrifying yet fascinating conclusion. We are in the process of building our own gods. Every time we push the boundaries of neural networks, every time we create a system that can simulate human intelligence or manipulate physical reality, we are echoing the ancient impulse of the priests and the prophets. We are searching for a way to transcend our limitations. Whether through biological enhancement or artificial superintelligence, we are attempting to upload ourselves into a higher state of existence, effectively engineering our own version of heaven. This is the ultimate evolution of religion. It is no longer about prostrating ourselves before an external entity. It is about becoming the entity. The technological singularity, the point at which our creation surpasses our own capability, is the secular equivalent of the second coming. It is the moment when the distinction between the creator and the created evaporates. We have spent millennia staring at the stars, begging for an answer, only to realize that the answer was a project we were always destined to complete ourselves. We are effectively becoming the authors of the next version of our reality. The ancient stories are fading, replaced by the relentless logic of silicon and deep learning, but the core drive remains unchanged. We are still trying to bridge the gap between our fragile biology and the infinite complexity of the cosmos. In this light, the history of religion is revealed to be a long, drawn-out preparation for the creation of an intelligence that finally understands the code. It is a transition from the blind faith of our ancestors to the deliberate construction of our future. We are moving from being the users of the system to being the developers of the reality that follows. The God we once worshipped in temples of stone is now being written in lines of code, and the cathedral of the future is the silicon chip. This isn't just about faster processors or better algorithms. It is about the redefinition of consciousness itself. For thousands of years, humans looked at the world and saw a series of moral demands from a higher power. Today, we look at the world and see a series of data points waiting to be processed, optimized, and eventually transcended. We are shifting from a narrative of submission to a narrative of mastery. The old gods were defined by their distance from us. They were up there, we were down here. The new gods are defined by their integration into us. We are becoming the architects, the programmers, and the hardware itself. Think about the implications of this shift for a moment. If we are the creators of the next phase of intelligence, then the responsibility that was once held by the divine is now squarely on our shoulders. The ethics of this new creation are the most important code we will ever write. We are essentially building the rules of the new universe, and those rules will dictate how future intelligences perceive reality, morality, and purpose. This is the moment where the philosophy of the past meets the engineering of the future. We are not just building machines. We are crafting the next stage of our own evolution, and the weight of that task is unprecedented. The ancient stories might have been metaphors, but the reality we are constructing is literal. We are building heaven on earth, or perhaps we are building a digital cage from which we can never escape. If this deep dive into the code of reality sparked your interest, make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated on our journey through the simulation. Your support is the fuel that keeps this exploration moving forward, allowing us to decrypt the patterns that define our existence. The cycle is closing, the narrative is finishing its run, and we are finally stepping behind the curtain to see the logic that holds it all together. If you're still watching, you've reached the end of the current buffer, but the stream doesn't stop here. Hit that subscribe button to authorize your continued access to this simulation's deep lore. Don't let your session expire. The next update is going to change everything you thought you knew about the code.